Hello, I am Dr. Kathleen Hall, and this is The Way I See It. Are you trapped by your fears? That's what we're going to talk about today. Are you trapped by your fears? To start us off, I'd like to begin with a little tiny short story of how I began my odyssey into fear. I've been fascinated by fear my entire life and realized after seeing many patients and written books and gone around the globe, very blessed to listen to the effect fear has had on many, many human beings' lives. How it's either trapped them and made them small, or made them into some of the greatest, forted them into some of the greatest people that have changed our planet. Anyway, for my own personal short story, I grew up and I was bathed in fear. I breathed in fear, slept in fear, everything. I thought it would dry up eventually. I assumed my fears were like raindrops, after a big rain and the sun comes out and the raindrops dry up. I thought that's what fear did. As a child, I had no, of course a child doesn't, idea of how it absolutely kind of almost migrates into your mitochondria and into your brain and your soul and your body. But I learned this is not the way our human psyche and bodies and our minds work, that they don't dry up like raindrops. They rivet every part of our life. I grew up in a very violent family, so of course listening in a bed at night with fighting and screaming, and my father was very violent. And fear of him killing us, killing the animals, fear of him leaving, meaning what if he never came back, fear of him coming home, knowing he was going to return, fear of watching my mother disintegrate into a almost catatonic state. And this went on for, I guess they were married 25 years, so all of my childhood. So anyway, I navigated it and decided that I was going to become it was by nature and nurture. Nature, a type A personality. Nurture, I decided I wanted to be more like the men I saw, not like the women. The reason being, women seemed to subjugate themselves back then and lived in fear. Fear of their husbands leaving them, fear of not having, money, fear of something happening to their kids. And I went, I had enough fear of my own. I was like, no, look at these men. They go out, they're powerful. So anyway, that's what I thought. I thought, being this superhuman woman, I don't have any fear. So I thought it would get better. Then I happened to marry a very kind, gentle, wonderful man who happened to be a physician and loves caring for people and, just an amazing human being. So I knew that since I lived with somebody like this, my fear would for sure leave me. Because I was married to this thing. I felt like he was like a sponge, right? This amazing, kind man that grew up in this loving family. It would just melt away like butter. But it didn't. And I started drinking and fighting, and it was horrible, and fear, total fear. But I tried to keep it at bay and pretend it wasn't there. I thought it'd get better, and it didn't. It grew. Then I thought it would get better. I got pregnant and thought having a baby. But the whole time I was pregnant, I was terrified. I was watching this baby grow inside of me going, oh my God, what if it's deformed? What if it's this? What if my fear goes into the baby and it's some kind of monster? I mean, every possible concoction you could think of, I was fearful of. So that was fearful. Then once the baby was born, I was afraid something would happen to the baby because of my fears, to punish me for not being happier. So it's kind of like flushing a toilet or watching water go down the drain. It just kept swirling. And then last but not least, I thought it would get better, so I became a financial expert, Wall Street, financial businesses, started my venture capital company, bought and sold companies. I thought, I'm going to take over the world, and these fears are just going to, look at these people on Wall Street. They don't have any fears. Well, fear. I didn't know I was around a bunch of fearful rats in a cage, which I was. And again, no disparaging thing to people like this. It's just that everybody was running for quotas, data, deadlines, money, promotions. It was all fear-based. It was a terrible experience for me personally, just me. I'm not talking about anybody else. Then I happened to be raised very Roman Catholic. So I was taught that fear was good because it kept you away from mortal and venial sins. So yeah, fear is great. Then you won't have affairs, you won't cheat, you won't gamble. That's, yeah, fear. But then when the fear was so bad, you were taught you could just pray it away. So I prayed. And then I felt like a failure because the more I prayed, it just seemed to grow like a cancer. So I tried zillions of ways to get rid of the fear. It was exhausting. More exercise, more dieting, more praying, more, oh, I can't tell you. It was exhausting. My life was exhausting. I was dwindling in a way, getting thinner and drinking more, and it was unbelievable. So that's my personal story about where I was. And let's talk about fear for a minute. So fear is a tricky human emotion. And it can paralyze you and keep you from your dreams. And it can keep you very small. Think about it. It can keep you very small. So if you're in a violent situation or a job you think you want to keep, a relationship, a marriage, or whatever it is, you can play small because that's what fear does. And it keeps you safe. Fear keeps you safe. Think about it. Fear can be your friend in just the right doses. But too much of it can kill you. So, it's part of our DNA. If you heard a roar of a lion, if you saw a snake, if you saw somebody violent, whatever you did, fear keeps us alive. It's a survival. It's amazing. If we didn't have fear, none of us would be here. So again, in the right dose, it is absolutely meant to be. And it can be a very good thing, but it has its place in moderation is the key. And what I'd like to talk about is fear can be a toxic poison, just like anger, or it can be a healing balm. Love your fear. That's all it needs. It only grows when you let it consume you. And that usually happens when we forget how helpful our fear is trying to be. It's kind of like a little angel or a little imp, a little fairy. I don't know, whatever your image would be. It really wants our best, however irrational it seems. Okay, so think of it as something on your shoulder, like a little fairy or something. It gets your attention, right? And for me, my Waterloo came when I was on Wall Street and I started having panic attacks, and they got worse, and I couldn't breathe, and I drank more and exercised more again, and finally, one day, I couldn't get in the elevator at the World Trade Center. I broke out in a sweat, and my heart started beating, and my life was over. I literally went back home, packed my things, came back to Atlanta, and knew it was over. And so what I did was I decided to make a circle, and I was going to list the 5 things I was most afraid of. So 5 things I was most afraid of was, number 1, being alone. 2, being poor, not having money. Next was not being powerful, because everything I did was to try to be powerful, to control other people so that I wouldn't have to be afraid, right? But I finally realized it. Not being pretty or attractive, because I could manipulate people, go into places, do that was a power. And not being the smartest person in the room. Those were my biggest fears. Because all of those things are controlling. And when you're so afraid of everything in life, as long as you feel like you're in control, you feel like this modicum of power, like it's not going to eat me, get me. So what I decided to do was do the thing I feared the most. Being alone, being poor, not being attractive, powerful, not being the smartest person in the room. I decided to sell everything and move to a farm in the middle of the woods. And it wasn't a farm back then, it was just a cabin. It finally grew into a farm though, but it was a cabin, no heat, no power, no nothing. And there was an outhouse. And so what I decided to do was live up there a year. I commuted back and forth from Atlanta. And no alcohol, no phone, no power, alone in the woods in the middle of the national forest. Well, all I can say is it was an experience. So every time I screamed, every time I was afraid, every time I heard a bear at night outside the door, every time a snake came up through the hole in the floor during the middle of the day, I faced a lot of fears, but I was by myself. So it changed everything because what I figured, this was my experiment. It was like a petri dish, like a circular petri dish that I had my fears in. So what I said to myself is if I don't face them now, I can probably manipulate the world and people the rest of my life. I'll probably go through a lot of marriages and a lot of suffering and whatever, but, I can get through this life. I can navigate it pretty good, pretty well. But if I decide at the beginning of my life to look and live inside this circle and look at all of these things and live through these things, then I can forward out an amazing life of intention and purpose and be authentic for the first time in my life and realize this fear did not kill me, that I learned to deal with it in some interesting way. So that's what happened. I did that, and what an experiment it was. I went to the country store and bought two pair of overalls, pair of boots, and 4 pair, I think it was 4 or 5 pair, of men's cotton T-shirts in a size small and a jacket. And those were my clothing for almost a year. I lived up there. Met the farmers, met the neighbors, learned how to till the land at night. Wounded animals that had been shot by hunters or shot with arrows by hunters or whatever came up, and that's how I began to rescue animals. I brought them back to health, so they became my first compatriots in my new family, and everything changed. Then I met this nun, and she invited me to a lecture from a South Vietnamese Buddhist monk. His name was, he's dead now, Thich Nhat Hanh. And I listened to his lecture. I fell in love with him, and I became a student of his, and it changed my life forever. So what I would like to do today is share the wisdom, the tremendous wisdom and love of this teacher with you and what I learned so that it can help you right now as you listen to this. It can change your life forever. He has been my teacher since 1995, and he has been a unique, beautiful healer and a beautiful method to overcome fear. Now, I've been through fear classes, fear books, fear this. I mean, I'm a counselor. I help people. I've been trained in all. This method is by far the most drastically changing, life-changing experience and method I've ever known or experienced. So, most of us experience a life full of wonderful moments and difficult moments. But for many of us, even when it's most joyful, there's a fear behind our joy. We fear that this moment will end, right? When you're at that peak moment. That we won't get what we need. That we'll lose what we love. Or that we're not safe. Even when I had my husband, I was afraid he'd leave me. I was afraid he'd run off with the nurse. I was, my daughter, I was afraid I wasn't good enough. I was afraid she'd get hurt. See, every joy had a shadow of fear. Often, our biggest fear is the knowledge that one day our bodies will cease to be functioning. That's one of our biggest fears, is dying. So even when we're surrounded by the conditions of happiness, our joy is not complete because there's this little voice that we fear death. I did hospice. I worked in hospice for many years, and it was one of the greatest experiences of my life, people facing fear of dying. We may think that if we ignore our fears, they go away. Remember those raindrops I talked about in the sun? But if we bury our worries and anxieties in our consciousness, they continue to affect us and bring us more sorrow. We're very afraid of being powerless. See, that's why I knew that fear was powerless, feeling of powerless. That's why I did all these things to try to be powerful. Boy, did it not work. But we have the power to look deeply at our fears, and then fear can't control us. We can transform our fear. We can. Fear keeps us focused on the past or worried about the future. Think about it. If we can acknowledge our fear, we can realize that right now we're okay. Right now, today, we're alive. Our bodies and minds and souls are working perfectly. Our eyes can see the beautiful sky. Our ears can hear the voices of our loved ones or our pets or the wind blowing. Yeah, we're alive. So the first step in Thich Nhat Hanh's method is the first part is looking at our fear. And looking at our fear is just inviting it into our awareness without judgment. Okay, and again, this was very hard being Catholic, coming up Roman Catholic, which I'm not now, but this is how I was raised. So and for all of us, it's hard to not have judgment. We just acknowledge gently that it's there. Hi, remember that little pixie I said, or fairy, or whatever's on your shoulder? Hi, there you are. This brings a lot of relief already. Then once our fears calm down, hey, yeah, you're right here. We can embrace it tenderly and look deeply into its roots, deeply into its sources. We can understand the origins of our anxieties and fears, and this will help us let go of them. Is our fear coming from something that's happening right now, or is it an old fear? A fear from when we were small that we've kept inside our whole lives. When we practice inviting our fears up, okay, come on up, it's okay, I'm safe, you're safe. We become aware that we're still alive, that we still have many things to treasure and enjoy. If we're not pushing down and managing our fear, we can enjoy the sunshine, the fog, the air, the water. We can enjoy everything. If you can look deep into your fear and have a clear vision of it, then you can really live a life that's worthwhile. But you can't bury it. So here's the fear practice that Thich Nhat Hanh invites us into. He invites us to treat our fear as if it's a little baby. Okay, so take your fear. It's a little baby, okay? Now I want you to really imagine it. Being a cute little boy or girl, little baby, beautiful little eyes. Fear needs to be treated as you would treat your baby, with tenderness, love, kindness, and deep listening. Treat your fear as if it was a tiny newborn baby. When a baby experiences hunger, fear, being cold, a wet diaper, or pain, what does it do? The baby cries out for help. Your fear is exactly like a crying baby. Help me, I'm here, right? It's saying I need something. Okay, isn't this cool? So I'm asking you to do a guided imagery. And I love doing this. I do it all the time. Because fear is something that's, we're human. So you have fears every day of your life, usually for the rest of your life. So I love this. I do it all the time. I don't want to say daily, but all the time. So do this guided imagery. You're sitting in a rocking chair. Oh, you should see the rocking chair I've created in my guided imagery. So make sure you create a cool, loving rocking chair. Mine has a little tiny squeak to it. You are sitting in a rocking chair with your baby. Your fear, right there it is in front of you. Wrapped in a beautiful, soft baby blanket. What's that baby blanket look like? Is it pink? Is it blue? Does it have animals on it? Is it yellow? What's that? How soft does it? Feel it. And look at that little baby's head sticking out in it. Your baby fear. And your baby is crying as you rock it in your rocking chair, back and forth and back and forth. And you're figuring out what your baby's trying to tell you. Is your diaper wet? Are you hungry? Are you cold? Are you in pain? Okay, your fear is crying out to you. And even if you haven't had a baby, have you had a little animal that you rescued or saved, or a puppy or a kitty, and it's crying out, and you're just rocking it and asking, are you wet? Are you hungry? Are you cold? Are you in pain? What are you crying? What do you need? What do I need, or what am I angry about? What am I doing, or what am I doing in the way I'm living? I promise you, even if your baby doesn't speak the first time, come back and rock it later. Another day, another time, another place. Rock it in that beautiful rocking chair. Love him or her. Love that fear. And I thank God that I found Thich Nhat Hanh as my personal beloved teacher, because through my life, the challenges that have been great, huge, and made me better, have had to be about overcoming huge, massive fears. Fears of losing a daughter, fear of cancer, fear of being broke, fear of not having money, fear of losing an election, fear. Every single one and many, 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 many more have come my way. And every time I became paralyzed, I sat there and rocked that baby, loved that baby, and said, speak to me. Okay, I'm not judging you. I'm becoming very, very aware. How can you teach me? What can I do? I don't want you to keep crying. A daily practice of mindfulness can be of enormous help. Beginning with our breath, beginning with awareness, we're able to meet whatever comes our way. Fearlessness is not only possible, it is the ultimate joy. You're not having joy on the top like cream, whipped cream on the top of a cup of coffee. Okay, it's not on the top with fear under it, boiling. It's the ultimate joy. It's the whole cup. When you touch non-fear, you're free. You're free. If I'm ever in an airplane and the pilot announces that the plane is about to crash, by the way, that's happened to me, I will practice mindful breathing. That's what I do. If you receive bad news, excuse me, I hope you'll do the same. But don't wait for that critical moment to arrive before you start practicing to transform your fear into mindful living. Remember, no one can give you fearlessness. Remember that. No one, nobody can give you fearlessness. My beautiful daughter couldn't, who grew up to be a physician and an amazing human being. My loving husband, my sister, my buddies, my best friends, my neighbor, Margaret. No one can give you fearlessness. Not even God. I mean, well, of course, we won't talk about it. Buddha, Jesus, Shiva. We're not here helpless. We're here to learn. Okay? So even if all these entities are sitting next to you, they don't drop it on you. It comes from within you. That's the gift. That's the beauty of it. You're transformed. But you have to practice it and realize it yourself. If you make a practice of mindfulness, when difficulties arise, you'll already know what to do. So I hope this helped. It helped me talking about it. Thank you for joining me. But don't be trapped by your fears. They're a gift. It's hard to believe it, but they will take you to a higher level and a cultivation towards your higher self, towards your real purpose, your authentic life. Please join us at the Mindful Living Network, and you can find us at ourmln.com, or just Google Mindful Living Network, or go to mindfullivingnetwork.com. We're on most social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter, X, TikTok, Instagram, Pinterest. Let us hear from you. Just hit the contact button. We get all your notes. I look at them personally. If you have an idea for a podcast, questions, please let me personally know. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for joining me today. I am Dr. Kathleen Hall. Blessings to you, and thank you for the privilege of your time.